During the 1990s and early 2000s, many hobbies popular amongst millennials were often scrutinized by the media, with some being labeled as
demonic,
or in some crazy way linked to the occult, violence, or moral corruption. This moral panic was largely fueled by sensationalist journalism, religious organizations, and concerned parents who feared that certain games, music, or entertainment in general were corrupting the youths. As someone born in 1993 myself, I grew up in kind of a sweet spot of this crazed phenomenon, but let's walk through some of these examples, and let's start with my favorite one,
Pokémon.
One of the biggest children's franchises of the late 90s, Pokémon, was accused of promoting witchcraft, evolution, and even demonic possession. Some religious groups claimed that Pokémon creatures were inspired by demons and that the game encouraged children to use magic and supernatural abilities, which they believed was linked to the occult.
Pocket monster, the spiral. And it stands for what? Male fertility. It's supposed to be able to mesmerize and hypnotize its enemies. This character over here is called Mewtwo. Every time that you see Mewtwo, he's in this pose. 3 fingers. It means hail Satan. Cute little one. Everybody, okay, everybody go, oh, come on. His tail. It's a lightning bolt. And it's a Satanic Z. The Pokémon trading card game is a new collectible card game that is made and distributed by Wizards of the Coast. What is a wizard? Male practitioner of black magic.
Some Christian groups, particularly in the US, cited Pokémon as a tool for satanic influence. Televangelist Pat Robertson, I think that's how you say that, even suggested that Pokémon characters were literally demons. Many schools in the US and other countries banned Pokémon trading cards due to concerns about gambling, obsession, and occult themes. And apparently in Saudi Arabia, Pokémon was just straight up banned in 2001 because authorities believed that it contained Zionist and Masonic symbolism, though I couldn't find too much detail on this specific topic. Though I will say, Pokemon did have that one messed up situation where kids had seizures watching the anime because of that Porygon episode. But, that was like a epilepsy kind of thing. And while I personally don't think it's problematic at all, I can see conservative folks being outraged that James was constantly cross-dressing. But to call it demonic is pretty hilarious. I just think that religious folks really tried hard to brainwash us as kids. And anything that distracted us from the religious messaging and the church-going dedication would be considered the devil's work because, it's influencing the youth to turn their back on the Bible's teachings, which that is like a whole other discussion on itself. I do have a little anecdote about this very thing. I remember when I got my Game Boy, I talked about it in my Pokemon video. My uncle was into some potentially unethical activities, and he happened to have acquired a Game Boy in his ventures. He sold it to my parents for cheap, which I got as a Christmas present. And then he took me to Walmart and got me Pokemon Red. Man, I stayed up so late playing. And, I turned out fine. Some major anxiety and ADHD and social awkwardness, but no demonic tendencies. So then later on, I remember my grandma told my parents that the devil was influencing me because I was sitting in front of the TV watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air while playing Pokemon on my Game Boy. I don't know how she was able to make a connection between that, but I don't know. I guess Catholics are just kind of wild like that. But isn't it wild that to this day, religion is wanting to stunt the study of specific topics like evolution? So, it does make sense that back then they would do the same thing. And I guess they saw Pokemon as counterproductive to their teachings against evolution. But, how can you show a young child a cool, bright, fire-breathing dragon and not expect him to fall in love with that franchise? Speaking of dragons, though,
Dungeons and Dragons.
Though Dungeons and Dragons, or D&D, was introduced in the 70s, its influence continued into the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, with the stigma of it being linked to Satanism kind of still persisting throughout the decades. In 1982, a made-for-TV movie called Mazes and Monsters, starring Tom Hanks, dramatized the idea that D&D could lead players to lose their grip on reality, and that still fear mongering kind of carried into the 90s. In 1984, Patricia Pooling, founder of Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons, or BADD, B-A-D-D. No, not that one. But BADD pushed the narrative that D&D led to violence and unaliving oneself. Though largely discredited, her campaign still influenced perceptions into the 90s. However, a study published in the American Journal of Psychiatry in 1990 found no link between D&D and real-world violence. Unfortunately, growing up, I didn't play Dungeons and Dragons because I just didn't know how, and I didn't know anyone that did. I always loved the concept though. I love like fantasy worlds and that whole aesthetic of, the idea of wizards and dragons. But I did always hear about all these things about how this game was demonic and that allegedly people would play this and lose their minds and think that the game is real life and do these heinous acts of violence, allegedly. Honestly, the best example of this is literally that season 4 of Stranger Things where everything crazy was happening in the town and the uninformed folk of this small town blamed Dungeons and Dragons and how it was like a satanic cult. Except instead of L in Arizona, we had like lizards and the sun and cholos. But yeah, I wish I could talk more about D&D, but I'm not as educated on what it was like to play it in the 90s and early 2000s, or before that, obviously. So I hope someone comments on this video and gives us some fun anecdotes on that. But yeah, speaking of magical and fantasy and demonic crap infused with dark fantasy, have y'all ever heard of
Magic the Gathering?
Look, I'm just saying, if Machete can play Magic the Gathering, then it can't be that bad.
You ever read your cards? Throw that one down. Draw out his counterspell.
I'm doing it.
Let me get in there.
No.
Just go, Holmes. It's over.
So as one of the first major collectible card games, Magic the Gathering, or MTG, was accused of promoting witchcraft, Satanism, and dark magic. Some fundamentalist Christian groups opposed MTG, claiming that it encouraged summoning demons and casting spells. Like, what the f is you talking about? I get it. But like, come on, it's just cardboard. Although I gotta give them religious folks the benefit of the doubt. If I also believed what they believe, although I guess I should point out at some point in this video, while I am clearly not a religious man, I have nothing against people's beliefs. Believe what you want. I'm kind of more leaning towards agnostic. I believe that we don't know for sure. And, for all I know, like Christianity or Catholicism or, Muslim or whatever religion you practice could be accurate. I don't know. I stick to the fact that I preach that I don't know. But I'm not ignorant to the fact that it could be real. But anyway, if I truly believed what these religious groups believed, I would probably also be concerned that people, and especially the youths, were playing with these demonic looking cards with names like Demonic Pact or Hellfire or Dark Ritual. But obviously to us young folk, or I guess I should say young folk of that era, as I'm in my 30s now. To the people who were young back then, that kind of stuff just looked cool. We didn't think we were playing with actual demonic entities. We just liked cool stuff. But like with D&D, I didn't actually play Magic the Gathering until a little bit later on in life. But coincidentally, as I was editing this video, someone that I'm sub to, the Nerd Crypt, uploaded a video about this exact topic on Magic the Gathering. And he goes into detail about how Magic was demonized, so go check that out. But another card game that I am extremely familiar with is
Yu-Gi-Oh!
And to the younger millennial crowd, the experience that the Magic players had before us, we were about to feel that same scrutiny with Yu-Gi-Oh! So I'll try not to get too into the same thing because it's a similar boat. Yu-Gi-Oh! Got basically the same scrutiny that Magic did. Although I can already feel someone about to type in the comments that no, Magic players had it way worse and Magic is so much better than Yu-Gi-Oh! I agree to some degree, just chill. But yeah, when I was young, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was the hot craze and my cousin and I were obsessed with it. Actually, to this day, I still love Yu-Gi-Oh! But I remember there being cards that were a little problematic if your religious grandma gets a whiff of them. And I guess the fact that the protagonist of the show talks about like dark magic and he himself is possessed by a spirit, and he also wore that leather and toit pants that makes conservative men insecure about their preferences, so they lash out and go on anti-homo campaigns because they can't face the reality of what they actually like. But okay, back to topic. Yu-Gi-Oh! It got the same backlash because it involved children playing with cards with art on it that did have some darker tones to it. And unlike Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh! Did like directly cater to children, or mostly cater to children, and they were like the main target audience. So of course the religious mob and media had a problem with it. I don't think I'm going to include like a whole section on TV or movies because that alone is probably a whole other discussion, and I don't know if I want to include that as a hobby per se. But I'm going to add just an anecdote here real quick about Dragon Ball Z. Yes, Dragon Ball Z, the anime about a ditzy hero who's insanely powerful and he's from another planet and he's a Saiyan and a monkey. So yeah, that anime. This is a dumb story about the Mexican news media. So I remember this newscast about an incident that happened in Mexico, and it was probably like a super local incident because I can't find anything online about it. But essentially I remember that these two kids were watching Dragon Ball Z, and there was like, I guess, a scene where Frieza uses his tail to choke Goku, and the kids saw this and chose to recreate the scene using a belt. And I don't think the other kid was fatally hurt, but it still caused a big commotion in the local community. And the one that did the choking swore that he was possessed and didn't do it on purpose, which even as a kid I remember thinking that he was just saying that so he could like get out of trouble. But of course, seeing as how Mexicans are and how the media there was pretty Catholic, they went nuts and claimed that Dragon Ball Z needed to be banned for influencing young children to perform demonic acts. Yes, I swear this is what they said. But yeah, I don't know. That story always kind of stuck with me, and there's no better place to share it than here, I guess. Anyway, segue to
Video games.
the rise of video games in the 90s and early 2000s, particularly titles like Doom, Mortal Kombat, and even Grand Theft Auto, sparked like a widespread belief that video games were promoting violence, rebellion, and in some cases, worst of all, demonic imagery. After the tragic Columbine high school shooting, the media heavily scrutinized violent video games. Doom was also one of those games that was blamed a lot for desensitizing people to violence. And from the early days of video games, there's been some imagery that could have been perceived in the realm of demonic. Ghosts and Goblins in 1985, a brutal side-scrolling platformer featuring demons, skeletons, and monsters where you battled through haunted graveyards and hellish landscapes. Castlevania, while primarily gothic horror, Castlevania featured demons, vampires, and other supernatural creatures inspired by classic horror mythology. Shin Megami Tensei, this RPG franchise, was heavily influenced by demonology, featuring summonable demons, occult themes, and apocalyptic settings. Doom, one of the most famous games associated with demonic imagery. Doom has the player fighting through hell itself, battling demons, imps, and massive grotesque bosses. Diablo, a dark action RPG where players descend through dungeon levels filled with demonic creatures, culminating in a battle against Diablo, the Lord of Terror, which Diablo literally means devil in Spanish. If my family would have seen a disc of Diablo sitting on my desk, I would have probably been sent off to like Catholic or Christian school. And, Silent Hill, while more of a psychological horror, Silent Hill featured disturbing demonic imagery, especially with like its grotesque monster designs and, hellish otherworld. So as the young generation became more and more obsessed with video games, obviously this again becomes a problem for the conservative crowd. And games like Mortal Kombat showing not only gruesome imagery but insane violence. Every hobby we had as kids just had those couple instances or, quote unquote bad apples that brought the whole hobby down and got it labeled as demonic. And video games seem to have more than just a few. But yeah, eventually these same kids became the adults with their own children, and video games obviously thrived. And just like with video games, music too has had claims of satanic influence for way longer than even millennials when we took over. So let's quickly talk about
Music.
so, music, especially heavy metal and even certain pop artists, was often accused of hiding satanic messages. Some religious groups claim that artists like Led Zeppelin and the Beatles hid demonic messages in their songs, which could be heard when played backwards.
Here, the Lord turned me off. Okay.
And it's funny that sometimes these groups would kind of egg on these rumors because you know what happened back in the day when records were forced to be played backwards? They'd mess up the records, so this helped increase sales because people would have to buy an additional copy if they wanted to actually enjoy the album after also wanting to hear these hidden messages. And throughout history, many artists have been accused or associated with satanic symbolism that scared the bejesus out of our parents. Though back in the 90s and early 2000s, it was mostly just lingering effects from older bands. Led Zeppelin, like rumors spread that Jimmy Page practiced occultism due to his fascination with Aleister Crowley, and some believed the song Stairway to Heaven contained backmasked satanic messages. And then Black Sabbath, despite their Christian-themed warnings about evil, their dark imagery and heavy sound led to accusations of Satanism. AC/DC, some believed Highway to Hell and Hell's Bells indicated satanic worship, and the band's name was rumored, incorrectly, to stand for Antichrist Devil's Children. Kiss, accused of being satanic in the 70s with rumors that their name stood for Knights in Satan's Service. Then there's Ozzy Osbourne, his song Mr. Crowley, and infamous stage antics like biting the head off a bat led to satanic rumors, though he has denied any involvement with Satanism. Iron Maiden, their song The Number of the Beast, caused religious groups to claim they promoted devil worship. And there's Slayer, songs like Angel of Death and South of Heaven fueled rumors, though the band said their lyrics were more about storytelling. And even though these are older bands, millennials did still heavily enjoy these acts. But for artists more in the generation of millennials, we have rapper Jay-Z, Beyonce, Rihanna, accused of Illuminati/satanic ties due to symbolism in their music and music videos. Though I guess by the time these artists came around, the demonic accusations weren't vital enough to make our parents really try to ban them. Plus, they were kind of easier to listen to. I do recall having the Crunk Juice album by Lil Jon and the East Side Boys, and there's a song that I love on there called The Blow. And, it's what hip-hop calls screwed vocals, like super deep. And when I would play the CD in the car, my parents thought it sounded demonic. And okay, while we're on the subject of music, I want to give y'all a funny anecdote about that same religious grandma that I mentioned earlier. I don't know if y'all remember, but when Obama was running for president in 2008, 2007, a lot of crazy religious people who were clearly trying to mask their racism had a problem with Obama because they claimed that he was the Antichrist. Yes, people thought that he was the coming of the Antichrist. It was kind of obvious to the rest of us. What they were trying to say is that they didn't like that he was black, but they defended their stance on him by labeling him the Antichrist. But anyway, the musical point of this was that if y'all remember A Milli by Lil Wayne, well, around this time, in very niche places of the internet, people made some wild parodies and covers of songs. One of them was an A Milli cover, but instead of repeating A Milli, A Milli, A Milli, the song repeated Obama, Obama, Obama. And my cousin and I, when we got together, we were like the obnoxious class clowns type around our family. So I don't know why we were just constantly singing Obama, Obama, Obama on loop, like in the song.
Man, Obama so ill. Yeah. Obama goes here, Obama goes there, saying yes we can.
And so my grandma accused us to our parents, saying that we're listening to demonic cult music influenced by Obama, further solidifying the fact that she knew in her heart that Obama was indeed the Antichrist. It is kind of funny that in the past 15 years, artists started leaning a lot into the whole demonic and satanic thing. And like, while they do have some people flipping out over it, it's like just an aesthetic choice now. Like back in the 90s or early 2000s, Lil Nas X could not have made this video for Montero and have gotten away with it. You know what? I wasn't going to really discuss movies or TV shows, but just quickly, I do want to mention Harry Potter. Even though it isn't a hobby, it's a staple in millennial culture. And even poor Harry got the occult allegations. There was even book burnings because some churches in the U.S. Didn't like that Harry Potter supposedly promoted the occult, and the Harry Potter books were burned. So I guess you can say that over time, any time that something has some darker, grungy imagery, you could always count on some religious folks to take a stand against the devil himself, trying to pull a fast one on innocent children or young adults. Over time, these accusations are always largely discredited, but the pattern continues today with new forms of entertainment, whether it's music artists, leaning into the whole demonic thing, or even politics and crazy conspiracies about satanic cabals. There will always be criticism over specific media that seems to be hidden agendas in favor of the occult. All I can say is Magic the Gathering is definitely innocent because it went from this to collabing with SpongeBob. And I know damn well SpongeBob would never associate with this. God damn it.